Inheritance. Inheritance is one of the basic concepts of object-oriented programming. When a class of object is defined, any subclasses can inherit some or all the properties from the base class. This means from the programmer that an object in a subclass needed not carry its own definition of data and methods that are generic to the class. It can have their own properties along with the base class properties. Necessity of inheritance, that means maybe the advantages of inheritance is reusability. That is, building a new component by utilizing the existing components. It is always good, productive, if we are able to reuse something that has already exists rather than creating the same again. This is achieved by creating new classes, reusing the properties of the existing classes, that is a base class or a superclass. Normally, the inheritance is defined as the mechanism of deriving a new class from the existing or the old class, that is called inheritance. The old class is normally called as base class or superclass, or also called as parent class. And the new class which is derived are also called as subclass, derived class or child class. That is, we are having a base class called as a parent class which has some properties and that can be inherited to a child class which contains all the properties of the base class or some properties of the base class, and that new class is called as child class. Inheritance have various types, that is in the form of different forms. One is single inheritance, multiple inheritance, hierarchical inheritance, multi-level inheritance, and hybrid inheritance. The single inheritance is said to be that we are having only one class, that is superclass, and that superclass can be inherited as a new class. And in a multiple inheritance, we can have more than one superclass, that is more than one base class, and that base classes can also be inherited to the another new class. In a hierarchical inheritance, we have one superclass, but we can have more than one subclasses, that is child classes can be more than one or two. But in a multi-level inheritance, which can be derived from one base class to a derived class, and subclasses can be derived again another class, and that is sub-derived class. And last one is hybrid inheritance. Suppose if you combine any two inheritance, which is either single inheritance with a multiple inheritance or hierarchical with the single inheritance, that is more than two classes or more than two forms can be inherited, and that is called as hybrid inheritance. So this is how the forms of inheritance are there. So this is one single inheritance. A is considered to be a super class and B is considered to be a child class. That is, the B is a child class which can have the properties of the super class. Likewise, in the multiple inheritance, we have two base classes and the properties of these two base classes can be derived into the child class called C. In the hierarchical inheritance, we have only one superclass and that properties of superclass can be subdivided into three more than one or three classes, that is namely B, C and D. In a multi-level inheritance, A is a superclass and B is a derived class which has the properties of superclass A. Again, C is a subclass which is subderived from the derived class B. That means, so the C class is a subderived class which contains the properties of A as well as the properties of B. In the form, another form, that is hybrid inheritance, which has two combinations. This is single inheritance and again this is multiple inheritance. So if you connect two types of single and the multiple inheritance, and that can be called as hybrid inheritance. In this, the properties of A is derived to the new class B. Again, B is considered to be a superclass and C is also considered to be a superclass here, and D is a derived class which has the properties of B as well as the properties of C. So let's see the format of inheritance. The subclass, that is derived class, have the format like class is a keyword and subclass name is a name which is given by us, and the colon is here and visibility mode is here. The visibility mode is considered to be that which indicates the properties of a subclass derived from the superclass. That means subclass contains its own members as well as the members of the superclass. This kind of situation occurs when we want to enhance the properties of existing class without actually modifying it. That is, so we no need to modify the superclass properties. So we can use the properties of the superclass to the subclass which is derived. The visibility mode is optional if present may be either privately derived or publicly derived. If the superclass is privately inherited by a subclass, public members of the superclass becomes private members of the subclass, and therefore the public members of the superclass can only be accessed by the member functions of the subclass. If the superclass is publicly inherited by a subclass, public members of the superclass becomes public members of the subclass, and therefore they are accessible to the objects of the subclass. This is an example for a single inheritance. We can see the first type of an inheritance. So class employee is a base class which is created, which has the definition as we have mentioned in a public. So this employee number and name and designation is considered to be the class member, that is member variable, and the member function get, which contains the values which is for employee number, employee name, and the designation. We get its values with the help of this get function. So the salary is a subclass which is derived from the superclass called employee with the visibility mode public. So in which we have the properties of the base class which is created already. These classes properties can be inherited to this base class subclass called salary, which contains the details of base class. In this subclass, we calculate the uh, net salary, net pay by calculating by addition basic pay, HRA, DA, and subtracting the PA. And at last, display method is used to display the content. So in the main program, we are calling by creating an object only for the base subclass. So we no need to create a object for the base class because the subclass contains the properties of the superclass. That is why there is no need to create a object for the superclass. Just simply we can create a object for the subclass which is inherited. So S is an object which is created for a subclass. So this S is an object which carries the properties of superclass employee. This is already created. So at last, with the help of the object created by the subclass, we can call the base class methods and we can display the values. This is how the inheritance works. So the inheritance is mainly used to inherit the properties of the base class to the subclasses.